Welcome back, it's me Lou. For today's video, we are going to showcase a custom action figure that I created. Just to clarify things, this is not a standard action figure that you can buy at retail. It's a one-of-one figure that I designed and made myself. Before we reveal my custom action figure, we're going to talk a little bit. About the inspiration behind it. So let's get started. So what we have here is the DC Multiverse Batgirl figure produced by McFarlane Toys. This is for the upcoming video game Gotham Knights. So months ago when this figure was first released, I reviewed it, and I believe this is the, third Batgirl figure that McFarlane Toys has given us so far. The first Batgirl figure we got was, I think it was Batgirl Art of the Crime. And that belonged to the wave where I think you got Nightwing and the Batman Who Laughs, and then the Build-A-Figure for that was like that small Batmobile. The second Batgirl we got after that was the Batgirl from the Three Jokers storyline. That's a really cool looking figure. I like that one a lot. And this was the third one. So when I reviewed this figure, I liked it a lot. And looking at it now, there's elements about this costume I really dig. But one thing that's always bothered me a little was the head. The head sculpt, it's really well done. It's beautiful. You know, one of the minor gripes I have with it is that she's doing that side eye thing where she's looking off to the side as opposed to looking directly at you. And as great as this action figure is, I think for me, I was really content with the Batgirl from Three Jokers. And then the Art of the Crime Batgirl was a really close second. This one was kind of like, I could have not necessarily done without it, but if this thing never came into existence, I don't think I would have missed it as much. Just because it's cool, it looks great, and I haven't played the video game yet, and I'm sure once it comes out, maybe I'll form much more of a sentimental attachment to the character design. But for now, it was like one of those things where I saw this, I reviewed it, and it's a cool figure. I like it a lot. But at the same time, every time I look at this figure, much like some of my other customs, I always find inspiration. Like, what else could this action figure be if I really got my hands dirty and messed around with it and, see what I could create, using this as the base body. Which brings us to this character right here. The character we're going to focus on is the one on our left. This is Stephanie Brown, also known as Spoiler. She's also a former Batgirl and a former Robin. But she's currently a Batgirl again in the new continuity. She's paired up with Cassandra Cain, also known as Orphan. And the two of them, they're known as Batgirls, and they're under the tutelage of Barbara Gordon, the OG Batgirl, and they operate out of the clock tower right there. So when I saw this figure here, I think subconsciously part of me was thinking, with all the purple on her, it kind of takes me back to, the Spoiler character. And I'm like, this costume here on the left seems very doable for a custom. I might have to make a couple of changes and take a few liberties, but I'd really like to take a shot at making the Spoiler character who's adopted the Batgirl name. So I'm like, let's do this. So that was my whole mission. I wanted to make something that closely resembled the Stephanie Brown Batgirl character, which we see right here. And then she also has a recent costume for Future State. This is a much more aged version of Stephanie Brown. It's still wearing the Batgirl costume, but it's a little bit more updated. And this was cool too. This was somewhat of an inspiration. I was kind of viewing this as, much more accelerated design from this one. If you look at it carefully, there's some similarities. The color scheme and some of the ribbing along the sides of the torso. But this one looks like it's a little bit based off, a little bit further into the future. Hence, the Future State moniker. But this is the figure I really wanted to, get my hands dirty and create the Stephanie Brown Batgirl. So let's take out my custom. And here she is. We have my Stephanie Brown Batgirl action figure. Now this was created using the Gotham Knights Batgirl as a base. As you can see here, they share the same body. And let's just take a look at her up close so we could talk about it. So one of the big trademarks with Stephanie Brown being Spoiler is that she always had a predominantly purple costume. And I think that's what worked well with this figure right here. The original figure had some purple on it. Spoiler also had a hood, so I kind of adopted that onto the action figure. And she also had she always wore like kind of like a face mask. It's kind of reminiscent of like, Katana or Melina from like Mortal Kombat. So I'm like, you know what? I think those are pieces I could find in my parts bin. And lo and behold, I had a couple of different hoods. The hood we're looking at right here was actually taken off a G.I. Joe Classified Series Storm Shadow, the first release. The masked head is actually a Marvel Legends head. I think that's from the Netflix Elektra figure. And all I did there was paint the hair blonde, and then I repainted the mask like a much darker shade of purple to kind of match this part of the bodysuit as closely as possible. And if you look here, Stephanie Brown as Batgirl, she has a utility belt with all these pouches, and then she also has one on her left thigh. So I wanted to give her like a utility belt, but I didn't want to bulk up the character too much. So I limited it to only 2 pouches. And this buckle and these pouches are taken from a G.I. Joe Classified Series Duke figure. And then that figure, I also cannibalized more pouches. And then I kind of created this harness and pouch strap for her left thigh using the Classified Series piece also. Let's take a look at that up close. I had to make some modifications to it slightly. And then overall, it was essentially just a repaint. I didn't go overboard. My color scheme's a little bit reversed though. On the Stephanie Brown character, her costume is predominantly dark with purple highlights. Mine's kind of the opposite in certain areas. Like over here, her chest is dark with a light emblem, and then mine is this, running down the center, it's this purple. I kept the stock purple from the Batgirl figure for the legs and the abdomen, just because I didn't want to repaint the whole figure. I talk about this in other videos. When I make customs, I don't like to do too much paint work, especially if it's in areas where the joints are articulated, just because I don't want the paint chipping off. And I also wanted the bat symbol to be, instead of going for a light purple here, I just went for a subdued purple, a dark purple to kind of match her mask. I didn't want it to be too loud. Like, even though she's adopted the Batgirl name, I still wanted this figure to feel more Spoiler-like than Batgirl. So for me, it's kind of like an in-between. This is like half Spoiler, half Batgirl. And then one thing I kind of wish I could have changed was the cape. Over here, Stephanie Brown has this giant flowing cape. And I'm just using the stock cape from the Batgirl figure, and it's a short cape. For me, I always associate short capes with sidekick characters, like Robin. Sidekicks, they're not decked out as much as their mentors. So in the case of this, she's still serving under Oracle. So I figure, she'll have a shorter cape. And then much like the proteges of Batman, they always have the 2 fins on the arm bracers. So I thought I'd keep that, even though she doesn't have them here. So for me, I use this more so as an inspiration, and this is kind of like the end result. I'm sure if I really dug into it, I could make something a little bit more accurate. But one of the fun things about creating customs is that it's a chance for you to like inject your own personality, your own sense of design into what you're creating. It doesn't always need to be a one-to-one accurate representation, of the character that you're recreating. If you want to make a character unmasked, you have that kind of power to do so. If you want to give the character a nice big flowing cape as opposed to what it really has, go ahead, go for it. And it's like I say, in the end, you don't have to make anyone else happy but yourself. If you're happy with the custom, that's the most important thing. So for me, I really wanted a spoiler figure, but at the same time, I kind of still wanted to embody the current state of the character, where she's one half of the Batgirls. And now that I have Stephanie Brown done, I'm kind of thinking I need a Cassandra Cain orphan figure. So this might be a project in the future. This is a question of finding all the right pieces too. And I was kind of lucky because, like I said, I had a hood to work off of and a masked head, much like Spoiler does. Alright, so let's take a look at the figure up close. First off, here is a full body shot of the character. So one of the things I did also, in addition to putting on the mask and then the hood, repainted her chest and the emblem, gave her the belt from the G.I. Joe Classified series, repainted that purple, created the harnessed thigh pouch deal over here, painted that purple, repainted the hands and the bracers purple, and then I kind of wanted to paint out her boots because I thought it looks cool. It kind of adds some balance to the character. Like for me, younger characters, especially in the 90s, they always had like big giant boots. I think it was this reflection of the fashion sense, during that time period. Like I remember when I was in college, like some of the girls I knew, they always wore these like crazy like giant thick boots, especially like when we go out clubbing, which made no sense to me because like how the hell do you dance in those things? But I kind of like the idea of painting out her boots because they look really like the initial figure. These boots weren't colored in, so it took on the appearance that the ankles and the lower legs were a lot thinner than they were. But then after I painted them out, it added some heft and bulk to the bottom half of the character, which I thought kind of balanced it out, especially since she has such a short cape and that the hood's kind of like much larger on her also, almost spanning the same width as her shoulders. So for me, sometimes designing a custom isn't always necessarily about hitting all the landmarks. Sometimes for me, it's also thinking about what's the character's silhouette going to look like. If I viewed the character from the front or from a profile and it was just a silhouette, would the character be identifiable? And for me, that was kind of the important things. Now, I wanted to make sure that her character silhouette still retained the hood, but at the same time, I think when I bulked out the boots by painting them, in my mind, it created a much more balanced composition in terms of her figure. So it seems like her lower half has as much weight as the top of the character. And the nice thing too is that since the hood's so large, it almost makes the character seem a little bit more squat than it really is. And for me, mentally, I always kind of associate that with a sidekick character. Sidekick characters are always shorter than their mentors. They're a little bit more like on the teenage side, and I think that design aesthetic played out really well with this also. She's a little bit more fashionable with the short cape and the thick boots and the big hood, and the fact that she's not carrying too much on her. Her utility belt only has 2 pouches as opposed to like Batman or Robin where there's like multiple pouches throughout. So there's almost kind of like a minimalist vibe to this character. She's a little bit more practical, and at the same time, she's also trying to be a little bit fashionably hip. So, now let's take a look at her up close. So the Marvel Legends head worked pretty well, especially with the mask, as you can see, and the hood. It kind of drove me crazy after I took the hood and painted it purple. Part of me was kind of like, I should have saved this hood for like a custom Raven figure from Teen Titans, because especially the way how the hood kind of points towards the top, kind of reminds me of that character. Yeah, so if for the most part it was a pretty stock and easy build. The thing that took the most time was just painting up the figure. The head was easy to do. I've done so many utility belts lately that it wasn't an issue. Same with this pouch on her thigh. Creating a strap for that and working off this is pretty easy. For the most part, I like to keep my customs very simple. I don't like to use too many tools or too much paint. My toolbox when I created this, essentially just consisted of like an X-Acto knife and just like super glue. And occasionally I'd pull out pliers just to like help take apart the figure in certain areas, but for the most part, it's nothing really crazy. If I had to rate this in terms of like skill level, this is, I'd say, slightly above beginner. So if you're still in the early stages of customizing, I think this is something that you could tackle and be successful at. I don't think this is necessarily a complicated custom. There's not a whole lot of part swapping going on here outside of the head. So yeah, this is my spoiler custom action figure. Stephanie Brown's a really fascinating character. Her history in DC Comics has been very complicated. I think one of the bigger storylines is, I think like in the late 90s, if you remember this, they did a story where she was like pregnant at the age of 15. So they took on the subject of teenage pregnancy. Later on, she became Robin. I think she was the 4th Robin under Batman. And then, of course, there's the ever popular spoiler character, which a lot of people are like attached to. And with the state of the Batman books right now, it just only made sense that they'd pair her up with like Orphan, aka Cassandra Cain, and make them the Batgirls. So I'm sure we'll get a spoiler figure or this version of Batgirl in the future from McFarlane, because right now it seems like they're really good at tapping into like relevant and current storylines and comic books. And with this being a character design that was from maybe like a year and a half ago, it seems like it's something that could easily be put on McFarlane's plate to do. So yeah, simple custom, nothing too complicated. Alright, so let's wrap this one up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you are new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. Alright, later.